Winter, 1948. The Carpathian Mountains. A castle stands against frozen peaks, its towers dark against white sky. Inside, soldiers in Soviet uniforms walk through rooms still warm with life. Teacups on tables. Books open on chairs. A child's toy on the floor. They came for a princess and found a home. But what they took was something else entirely. Before we climb these stairs into the past, if you're drawn to places where history refuses to stay silent, let the algorithm know you're here. One click keeps you connected to the stories that time tried to erase. The castle sits at the mouth of a pass. That's the first thing to understand. Not on a plain, not overlooking a city, but at a threshold, between two worlds that have been killing each other for 1,000 years. On one side, Transylvania. On the other, Wallachia. Between them, a corridor of rock barely wide enough for 2 carts to pass. The Bran Pass. For 8 centuries, everything that moved between these lands came through this gap. Merchants, armies, refugees, invaders. All of them had to walk beneath the shadow of whatever fortress controlled the heights. That's why the castle exists. Not because of Dracula. Not because of vampires. Not because of anything supernatural. Because geography is destiny. And this spot demanded a fortress. The mountains here rise like walls. The Busigi Range to the east. Piatra Craiului to the west. In every direction, impassable ridges covered in forest. Impenetrable. Hostile. Except for this one passage. A natural gate carved by ancient rivers. 30 meters wide in some places. Narrow enough that 10 men could defend it against hundreds. Strategic. Inevitable. The first people to recognize this were the Cumans. Turkic nomads who swept through in the 1100s, raiding settlements, vanishing into the mountains. Then the Pechenegs. Then others whose names are forgotten. By 1211, someone had to stop them. They came from Germany. Knights wearing white cloaks with black crosses. The Teutonic Order, not monks. Not missionaries. Soldiers. King Andrew II of Hungary invited them. Gave them the Burzenland, the land of Biaresa, named after a Cuman tribe that no longer existed. Told them to build fortresses. Defend the southeastern border. Keep the raiders out. So they built. At Bran, they raised a wooden fortress in 1212. Logs and earth. Watchtowers. Palisades. Enough to hold 50 men and see 20 miles down the pass. It wasn't a castle. It was a checkpoint, and it worked. For 14 years, the Teutonic Knights controlled the pass, collected tolls, turned back raiders, became powerful, too powerful. By 1226, King Andrew realized his mistake. The Teutons weren't defending his land anymore. They were building their own kingdom, so he expelled them. Drove them north into the Baltic, where they'd spend the next 2 centuries conquering Prussia and Lithuania. The wooden fortress at Bran was abandoned. For 150 years, it rotted. The pass went undefended. Raids resumed. Trade suffered. The people of Brasov, the Saxon city 30 kilometers north, watched caravans get ambushed, watched Ottoman scouts probe the mountains. Something had to be built. But this time, it would be stone. November 19, 1377. King Louis I of Hungary signed the decree. The citizens of Brasov, the Saxons, descendants of German settlers, received permission to build a fortress at Bran. Not the king's money. Their money. The Saxons would pay for everything. Labor, stone, timber. In exchange, they'd control the customs point. They'd collect 3% of the value of every good passing through. Enough to fund the construction. Enough to make it worth the investment. It was a business arrangement. Fortification as commerce. Construction began immediately. Winter of 1377. Workers hauled stone from local quarries. Limestone from the mountains. Oak from the forests. They built on the ruins of the Teutonic fort. On the same strategic outcrop. A cliff of rock rising 60 meters above the pass. Perfect visibility. Impossible to assault from below. They worked for 11 years. Not because the design was complex. Because building on a mountain is brutal. Every stone had to be dragged uphill. Every timber lifted by rope. Workers fell. Some died. Winters stopped construction for months. But by 1388, it was finished. Bran Castle, 7 rooms. 4 levels. Towers at each corner. Walls 3 meters thick. A courtyard in the center. Narrow staircases connecting floors. Windows facing every direction. And at the heart of the courtyard, a well, 57 meters deep. Drilled through solid rock. Deep enough to reach water even during siege. Deep enough that if you dropped a stone, you'd count to 4 before hearing the splash. That well defined everything. It meant the castle could hold out indefinitely. No need to surrender for lack of water. No need to ration. As long as the well flowed, the fortress stood. The Saxons knew what they were building. Not a palace. A machine for control. The castle's purpose was dual. Military and economic. First, defense. The southern border of Transylvania was the front line against the Ottoman Empire. By the 1380s, Turkish armies were pushing into the Balkans. Conquering Serbia. Threatening Hungary. The fortresses along the Carpathians were the last line. Bran was one link in that chain. If Ottoman forces tried to invade through the pass, they'd face arrows from the towers. Stones dropped from the walls. A bottleneck where hundreds could be stopped by dozens. It never came to that. The Ottomans never launched a major assault through Bran. But the threat shaped everything. Second, customs. The castle wasn't just watching the pass. It was taxing it. Every merchant caravan traveling between Wallachia and Transylvania had to stop. Declare their goods. Pay 3% of the value. Salt. Wool. Grain. Wine. Weapons. Everything. The customs officers lived in the castle. They kept ledgers. Recorded transactions. The tax revenue funded Brasov. Funded repairs. Funded soldiers. For 2 centuries, Bran was a tall booth with battlements. And it made someone very rich. The question was always who controlled it. In the 1440s and 1450s, Wallachia was ruled by a family called Dracula'S. The House of the Dragon, Vlad II, Vlad the Dragon, held the throne. His son, born around 1431, would become known as Vlad Thuring, Vlad e Pete. Vlad the Impaler, the man whose name would become Dracula. He never lived at Bran Castle. That's the first myth to kill. No evidence. No records. No furniture. No letters. No stories from his time placing him there for more than a few nights. What's known is this: in the 1450s and 1460s, Vlad III fought constantly with the Saxons of Brasov. They supported his rivals. He retaliated by raiding their villages, burning, impaling. His cruelty became legendary. In 1460, Ottoman records suggest Vlad IP may have passed through Bran, possibly held briefly by Hungarian forces, possibly interrogated. But he didn't own it, didn't renovate it, didn't rule from it. His actual fortress was Poenari, a ruined citadel 100 kilometers west, high on a cliff above the Argy River. That's where he commanded. That's where he lived. So why is Bran called Dracula'S Castle? Because in 1897, an Irish writer named Bram Stoker published a novel. He'd never been to Romania, never seen Bran. But he read descriptions of Transylvanian castles in a British library. He needed a Gothic setting, a fortress in the mountains, a place that felt ancient, cursed. Stoker's fictional count, Dracula, lived in a nameless castle somewhere in the Carpathians. For decades, no one connected the novel to Bran. But in the 1970s, Romania's communist government was desperate for tourist revenue. They started marketing Bran as Dracula'S Castle. It worked. The myth became more valuable than the history. And now millions visit each year, searching for a vampire who was never there. The irony is, the real history is darker than the fiction. Between 1400 and 1700, Bran Castle changed hands like currency. Hungarian kings granted it to nobles. Nobles lost it in wars. It was leased, sold, seized, returned. The Saxons of Brasov controlled it for decades at a time. Then the Wallachian princes. Then, Hungarian nobles again. For long stretches, it was forgotten. By the 1700s, the Ottoman threat had receded. The customs point was less important. Trade routes shifted. The castle fell into disrepair. Roofs leaked. Towers crumbled. The well dried up in summer. No one wanted to pay for repairs. By the 1800s, Bran was an administrative building, a backwater post. Minor officials lived there, kept records, collected taxes on timber and livestock. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't mysterious. It was a bureaucratic office in a crumbling fortress. Then, in 1883, an earthquake struck. Walls cracked. The southwest tower collapsed. The wooden staircases splintered. For 3 years, the castle was declared unsafe. Repairs were made. Minimal. Practical. But the fortress remained empty of grandeur. By 1918, at the end of World War I, Bran Castle was just another ruin in the mountains. Until someone saw its potential. Her name was Marie, born a British princess, granddaughter of Queen Victoria, married at 17 to Ferdinand, Crown Prince of Romania, by 1920. She was Queen Marie of Greater Romania. Her country had doubled in size after the war. Transylvania, once part of Hungary, was now Romanian, and Transylvania had castles. On December 1, 1920, the City Council of Brasov made a decision. They would gift Bran Castle to Queen Marie. Not because she asked. Because they wanted her favor. The official decree called her a great queen, spreading her blessing wherever she went. They wanted her to love Transylvania, to visit, to be seen. Marie accepted. She had other palaces. Pelik, Kotrosini, Polidor. All grander. All more comfortable. But Bran was different. It was medieval. It was Gothic. It was a fortress on a mountain, wrapped in mist and legend. It was the castle of fairy tales. And Marie had always believed in fairy tales. She decided to transform it. The architect was Karel Liman, a Czech who had already designed Pellet's castle and Pellet, or experienced in blending medieval aesthetics with modern comfort. Queen Marie gave him a challenge. Turn a crumbling customs house into a royal summer residence. Keep the fortress character. Add elegance. Work began in 1920 and continued for 12 years. They added 2 towers. One on the east side, one on the west. Both contained spiral staircases, making it easier to move between floors without navigating the narrow medieval passages. They replaced the leaking roofs, installed windows where there had been arrow slits, added electricity, powered by a hydroelectric station built at the base of the hill, running water, indoor plumbing, heating systems. The 57-meter well in the courtyard was covered. It had proven insufficient during the renovations, so a new water system was piped in from a mountain spring. But the most dramatic change was aesthetic. Marie filled the rooms with furniture. Tapestries, Persian rugs, paintings, armor, weapons from the 14th century, furniture from the 16th. She mixed eras, mixed styles. She wanted it to feel timeless. A castle that could have existed in 1300 or 1900, impossible to pin down. Her bedroom was in the southwest tower. Small, intimate, with a fireplace and a view over the pass. She built a tea room on the ground floor, covered the walls in embroidered textiles, installed a balcony overlooking the valley. Outside, she added gardens, roses, a greenhouse, paths winding through the forest. The castle became hers. Not a museum, not a monument, a home. Between 1920 and 1938, Bran Castle was the heart of Queen Marie's summers. She arrived in June, stayed through September, brought her children, her grandchildren, artists, poets, politicians. Princess Ileana, her youngest daughter, loved it most. Ileana spent entire summers there, riding horses through the mountains, reading in the towers, sleeping in the small rooms with windows that opened onto cliffs. Years later, she would write about those days. The smell of wood smoke, the taste of mountain water, the sound of wind through the fortress at night. It was, she said, the happiest place of her childhood. Queen Marie hosted dinners in the Great Hall. Candlelit, medieval style. She dressed in traditional Romanian costumes, wore peasant blouses embroidered with red thread. She wanted to be part of Transylvania, to embody it, and the people loved her for it. In 1938, Queen Marie died of cancer. She was 62. Bran Castle passed to Princess Ileana. But the world was already darkening. World War II came to Romania in stages. First, alliance with Nazi Germany. Then, Soviet invasion from the east. Then, in 1944, King Michael's coup. Romania switched sides, joined the Allies. But the damage was done. By 1945, Soviet troops occupied the country. By 1947, the Romanian Communist Party forced King Michael to abdicate. Princess Ileana knew what was coming. She had turned Bran Castle into a hospital during the war, treating wounded soldiers. Romanian, German, Soviet. She didn't discriminate. The Red Cross flag flew from the towers. But in 1948, the communists came for the royal family. Orders were clear. Confiscate all properties. Expel the monarchy. On a January morning, soldiers arrived at Bran. They gave Princess Ileana 2 hours. She packed what she could. Clothes, letters, photographs. Her 10-year-old son, Dominic, stood in the courtyard watching guards inventory the rooms. The furniture stayed. The tapestries stayed. The books stayed. Everything stayed. They were put on a train to the border. Dominic pressed his face to the window, watching the mountains disappear. He would not see Bran Castle again for 58 years. In 1956, the Romanian government reopened Bran Castle as a museum. Dracula'S Castle. Not a royal residence. Not a medieval fortress. A tourist attraction built on a lie. They installed displays. Torture devices that were never used there. Coffins. Fake crypts. Anything to feed the vampire myth. It worked. Through the 1960s, 70s, 80s, thousands of tourists came. Westerners hungry for Gothic thrills. Romanians curious about their own history. The castle made money. But it decayed. Roofs leaked again. Paint peeled. The gardens went wild. No one cared. It was state property. Maintenance was minimal. The communist regime didn't care about Queen Marie. Didn't care about the Saxons. Didn't care about the actual history. They cared about Dracula. Because Dracula sold tickets. And so the castle became a parody of itself. A theme park in stone. That might have been the end of the story. But then, in 1989, the regime fell. The revolution was swift. Ceausescu executed on Christmas Day. The communist government collapsed. And suddenly, everything confiscated in 1948 was up for debate. In 2005, the Romanian parliament passed a law. Properties illegally seized by the communists could be reclaimed by their original owners. Or their heirs. Dominic von Habsburg was 67 years old, living in New York. An architect. He filed a claim. He had the documents. The 1920 deed gifting the castle to Queen Marie. The 1938 will passing it to Princess Ileana. Proof of the 1948 confiscation. The Romanian government resisted. Bran Castle was a national monument. A tourist site. How could it be private property? But the law was clear. On May 26, 2006, the castle was officially returned to the Habsburg family. Dominic stood in the courtyard, where he'd watched soldiers 58 years earlier. The furniture was gone. The tapestries were gone. Most of Queen Marie's belongings had been sold or stolen. But the castle remained. And now it was his. In 2009, Dominic von Habsburg and his sisters opened Bran Castle as Romania's first private museum. They kept the Dracula branding. Too valuable to abandon. But they added exhibits on Queen Marie, on Princess Ileana, on the real history. Today, over 600 Zalozan visitors come each year. They walk the 57 rooms, climb the spiral staircases, stand at the well in the courtyard, now covered by glass. They see the secret passage connecting the first and third floors. A narrow corridor hidden behind a fireplace. Discovered during Queen Marie's renovations. Used by soldiers centuries earlier as an escape route. They visit the torture museum in the basement. The medieval weapons collection. The royal furniture that was slowly reacquired. Some come for Dracula. Some come for the architecture. Some come because it's on the itinerary. But everyone leaves with the same question. What was this place? Really? A fortress. A customs house. A royal retreat. A communist museum. A private home. All of these. None of these. The paradox of Bran Castle is that it was never one thing. It changed with every century. Every owner. Every regime. The Teutonic Knights built it for defense. The Saxons built it for profit. Queen Marie built it for beauty. The communists built it for propaganda. And now, it exists for memory, not the memory of Dracula. Not the memory of vampires, but the memory of what happens when history is layered so thick that truth becomes indistinguishable from myth. The castle stands. The walls are real. The well is real. The stones are real, but the story is a palimpsest. Scraped and rewritten so many times that the original text is lost. Was Lad the Impaler here? Probably not. But the myth persists. Did Queen Mary love this place? Yes. The evidence is everywhere. Is it haunted? Some say yes. Locals refuse to enter at night. Guides tell stories of footsteps in empty halls. Cold spots. Shadows moving in the towers. But others say it's just wind. Just temperature. Just the creaking of a 600-year-old fortress settling on its stone foundation. The truth is, no one knows. And perhaps that's the point. Imagine standing in the courtyard at dusk. The mountains turn purple. Mist crawls down from the peaks. The towers catch the last light. You're alone. The tourists have left. The gates are locked. And for a moment, you feel what everyone who stood here felt. The Teutonic Knights watching for raiders. The Saxon merchants counting coins. Vlad, EP passing through, his army stained with blood. Queen Marie sitting in her tea-room, embroidering. Princess Ileana as a child, running through these halls. Communist guards inventorying stolen treasures. They're all here, not as ghosts, but as echoes. The castle absorbed them. Holds them still, and when you walk these rooms you walk through centuries. That's the real story of Bran Castle. Not Dracula. Not vampires. But the slow accumulation of human presence. Layer upon layer upon layer. Until the building itself becomes a kind of consciousness. Some visitors ask what's the scariest room. Guides point to different places. The basement. The towers. The secret passage. But the truth is, nothing in Bran Castle is designed to scare you. It's designed to confuse you. Staircases that spiral up and then dead end. Rooms that connect in unexpected ways. Corridors that seem to double back on themselves. This wasn't accidental. Medieval fortresses were built to disorient invaders. If enemy soldiers breached the walls, they'd find themselves lost. Trapped. Easy to ambush. The layout was defensive psychology. And it still works. Modern visitors get lost. Miss rooms. Walk the same hallway twice without realizing it. The castle plays tricks. Not supernatural tricks. Architectural tricks. But when you're alone in a stone corridor, and you're not sure which way leads out, and the shadows are long, and the walls are thick, and the silence is absolute, it doesn't feel like architecture. It feels like something else. In 2014, Dominic von Habsburg put Bran Castle up for sale, asking price. They're 80 million. The Romanian government declined. Too expensive. Politically complicated. No private buyers emerged. So the castle remains with the Habsburg family. Operated as a museum. Managed by a private company, and it thrives. Ticket sales fund restoration. The roofs have been repaired. The towers reinforced. The gardens replanted. It looks better now than it has in a century. But something's missing. The castle is preserved. But it's not inhabited. No one lives there anymore. No one eats in the Great Hall. No one sleeps in the towers. It's a museum. A monument. And monuments don't breathe. There's a story locals tell. On winter nights, when the castle is closed, when the snow is deep, you can see a light in the southwest tower. Queen Marie's bedroom. It flickers. Like a candle. Then goes out. No one has been inside. The doors are locked. But the light appears anyway. Some say it's electrical. A malfunction. Reflected moonlight. Others say it's her. Still there. Still dreaming of the summers she spent in the mountains. The guides don't talk about it during tours. It's not part of the official history. But everyone who works there knows the story. And some of them have seen it. If you visit Bran Castle, you'll notice something strange. The deeper you go into the building, the quieter it becomes. Not because of soundproofing. Because of the stone. 3-meter thick walls. Stone that's 6 centuries old. Limestone that holds cold like memory. Sound doesn't carry. Voices flatten. Footsteps vanish. You can be in a crowded room on the first floor, and then climb to the third, and suddenly, silence. Complete. The kind of silence that makes you aware of your breathing. Your heartbeat. The kind of silence that feels like it's listening. Historians argue about what Bran Castle means. Some say it's a symbol of Romanian resilience. A fortress that survived every invader. Others say it's a symbol of exploitation. Built by Saxons to tax Romanians. Owned by foreign dynasties. Still others say it's just a building. Stone and wood. No more meaningful than any other castle. But buildings shape the people who live in them. And this building shaped queens. Shaped soldiers. Shaped merchants and refugees and children. It gave them walls to hide behind. Rooms to think in. Windows to see the world through. It was a machine for living. And the machine still works. So here's the question you should ask. Not, is it haunted? Not, did Dracula live here? But this. What does it mean for a place to survive? Bran Castle has outlived empires. Outlived the Teutonic Order. The Hungarian Kingdom. The Ottoman threat. The Romanian monarchy. The Soviet occupation. It has outlived everyone who ever owned it. And it will outlive us. That's the uncomfortable truth of old buildings. They don't need us. We need them. We need them to hold history. To prove that the past was real. To give us something solid in a world where everything else is shifting. The castle is evidence. Of what happened. Of what was lost. Of what remains. And that's why people keep coming back. There's one room most tourists skip. On the second floor. Small. No furniture. No decoration. Just 4 walls. A window. A wooden floor. It was a storage room. Used for keeping grain. Or documents. Or nothing. But if you stand in that room and look out the window, you see exactly what the Saxons saw in 1388. The pass. The mountains. The valley stretching toward Brasov. The view hasn't changed. The roads are paved now. The forests are managed. The villages have grown. But the shape of the land is the same, and for a moment, you understand why they built here. Not because of Dracula. Not because of legend. But because from this window, you can see everything. And if you can see everything, you can defend everything. That was the logic. That was always the logic, and it worked for 600 years. Princess Ileana died in 1991, Pennsylvania, age 83. She had become an Orthodox nun, founded a monastery, spent her final decades in prayer, but she never forgot Bran. In interviews, she said the castle was the only place she ever felt at home. Not Bucharest. Not Vienna. Not New York. Only Bran. She described waking up to the sound of birds in the mountains. The smell of wood fires. The light coming through the narrow windows. She said it was the only place where time moved differently. Slower. Deeper. She said you could feel the centuries there. Feel the weight of all the people who had lived and died within those walls. And she said that weight wasn't sad. It was comforting. Like being held by something older and stronger than yourself. Today, the Habsburg family still owns Bran Castle. Dominic von Habsburg is in his 80s now. His children help manage the museum. They've returned some of Queen Marie's furniture. Repurchased tapestries at auction. Restored paintings. Slowly. The castle is becoming itself again. Not the medieval fortress. Not the communist theme park. But something in between. A place that honors its layers. Its contradictions. A place that refuses to be one story. And so the castle stands. Not as a monument to Dracula. Not as a monument to anything. But as a witness. To the Teutonic knights who raised the first walls. To the Saxons who built in stone. To the soldiers who defended the pass. To the merchants who paid their taxes. To Vlad E.P.T., who maybe passed through once, leaving nothing but rumor. To Queen Marie, who turned cold stone into a home. To Princess Ileana, who lost everything. To the communists, who tried to rewrite history. To Dominic von Habsburg, who came back. All of them are here. Not in the walls. In the silence between the walls. And when you walk those halls, you walk through them. Through their hopes. Their fears. Their dreams of what this place could be. That's the real darkness of Bran Castle. Not the shadows. Not the legends. But the realization that every place we build is temporary. And every life we live is an echo. And someday, long after we're gone, someone will stand where we stood and wonder who we were. The mountains remain. The pass remains. The fortress remains. Not as Dracula's castle. Not as a royal palace. But as proof that stone outlasts myth. That walls outlast legends. That silence, in the end, is louder than any story. And perhaps that's enough. If you found yourself pulled into this place where history and myth refuse to separate, there are more forgotten worlds waiting. Subscribe to make sure the next one finds you. And tell me, what other castles should we walk through together? The comments are open. The past is listening.